Welcome to the Vaughan Nelson podcast. Today is the third quarter 2025 Vaughan Nelson Small Cap Value Recap. And with me today is lead senior portfolio manager, Chris Wallis. And with that, Chris, we'll turn things over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. During the quarter, we experienced a fairly strong risk-on environment, a combination of easing financial conditions combined with relatively benign inflation, and an employment report set off a powerful risk-on rally in the second half of the quarter. Investors began reducing bearish positioning, leading to a powerful move in the most heavily shorted stocks, with price appreciation inversely correlated with market capitalization of the underlying security. Such price action is consistent with broad market participants' positioning that is out of step with the underlying economic fundamentals. Once the short covering and repositioning is complete, security prices will adjust back to their underlying fundamentals. With the strong equity market appreciation over the last 2 quarters, some short-term price consolidation may be necessary. However, we do expect conditions to remain relatively supportive of equity markets. Inflation should continue to rise minimally over the very short term, but should peak at levels that will not harm equity valuations. Economic growth should also continue to improve during the fourth quarter and into the first half of 2026. The inflation and growth outlook are already reflected in the current Treasury yield curve, as yields on the short end of the curve have fallen with the rate cuts, while the yields beyond 3 years have actually risen over the last 12 months. As the results of buys and sells and market action, the largest moves in sector weightings were increases in the consumer staples, financials, and consumer discretionary sectors, and decreases in technology, healthcare, and the real estate sectors. During the quarter, the portfolio experienced positive absolute but negative relative performance, with positive relative performance was most notable in real estate and the technology sectors, and the largest detractors were in healthcare, industrials, energy, and in materials. And that's a pretty quick summary for the quarter. Essentially, everybody was positioned too bearishly. We've seen a lot of repositioning, which is short covering. And we do expect things to continue to improve fundamentally from an economic standpoint. And we expect liquidity to somewhat improve as the Fed pivots from QT and maybe what gold and silver are signaling move all the way over to renewed QE. So that's a quick summary for the quarter.
All right, Chris, very good. Well, with that, we'll turn over to returns. In the third quarter of 2025, the Vaughan Nelson Small Cap Value Strategy returned 8.78% gross, 8.52% net versus the Russell 2000 Value Index at 12.6%, which brings the year-to-date return for the Vaughan Nelson Small Cap Value Strategy to 7.71% gross, 6.91% net, and 9.04% for the Russell 2000 Value. Over the course of the past year, Vaughan Nelson Small Cap Value Strategy has returned 5.75% gross, 4.7% net, and 7.88% for the Russell 2000 Value. Over the past 3 years, Vaughan Nelson Small Cap Value Strategy has returned 16.25% gross, 15.11% net, and 13.56% for the Russell 2000 Value. Over the past 5 years, the Vaughan Nelson Small Cap Value Strategy has returned 17.5% gross, 16.34% net, and the Russell 2000 Value is at 14.59%. And last, over the course of the last 10 years, the Vaughan Nelson Small Cap Value Strategy has returned 10.79% gross, 9.7% net, and the Russell 2000 Value sits at 9.23%. And with that, Chris, that's a wrap on the third quarter. So thank you for joining us, and we'll have you back here soon.
The views, information, and/or opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Vaughan Nelson and its employees. Vaughan Nelson does not verify and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy of any of the information contained in the podcast. The primary purpose of the information, opinions, and thoughts presented in this podcast is to educate and inform. This podcast, or any podcast in the series, does not constitute professional investment advice or services, and any reliance on the information provided is done at your own risk. Past performance is not an indication of future performance. By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that the entire contents of this podcast are the property of Vaughan Nelson or used by Vaughan Nelson with permission and are protected under U.S. copyright and trademark laws. Securities discussed within this podcast may be held in the Vaughan Nelson strategies.